Hello, this is Melissa, and it is Real History on Thursday, the 4th of December, 2025. And it actually is the afternoon of the 4th of December. I never do that, but that's how the schedule worked out. I told you last week that I was going to be talking with Christine, and that didn't work out. We had some nice conversations that we haven't recorded, but her house, it sounded like this kind of creative and exciting chaos, but definitely a chaos that she didn't really want to record around. So we are going to do that next week. I'll be talking with Christine, and she's lovely. A wife, a mother, an artist, a business owner, and a community actress doing community theater murder mysteries. Isn't that fun?
That sounds so much fun.
Yeah. But today I'm back with Nick Hayes from Hayes Reviews, and we are talking about a few more chapters of that hideous strength. And I think we're just going to dive in. Oh my goodness, look, we're both
Wow,
we're wearing scarves.
it happened again. Gotta
Look.
love those synchronicities.
Oh no, this is well, I'll have to tell you the story of the scarves. So, my friend Judy wanted to send me a scarf. She had picked out a scarf that she was going to give me as a birthday. I won't tell you when that is, but my birthday.
It's
And
worth mentioning as well that you interviewed Judy on Real History, and there's a
yes,
really great episode that I caught up on recently, and it had me in stitches. And it's worth mentioning that for anyone who isn't aware, because it's an older Real History. I think it's 2 years old or something now. So,
hmm.
yes, if anyone wants to know more about Judy after hearing this story, you can do that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. That episode was in 2023 and it was entitled Judy in Disguise with Glasses.
Yeah, it's a great title as well.
Yeah, I love Judy. And she sent me a scarf. Now, I'm not wearing the scarf that she, sent me, but I do have it on my lap. I should say I'm wearing it on my lap. Doesn't that look good with the one that Nick is wearing? And then she just as a bonus, she said, "Well, I had to send you this one. It just looks like you." And so I'm like, "Oh, and I just opened it up last night. I thought it was the one that she was sending Nick, and she wanted me to send it to Nick, but she'd already taken care of that. And so I said, "Oh, great, I got the scarf, and I'm going to send it to Nick." And she said, "No, no, that's for you." So here we are. Now, Judy sent me a message last night, and she said, "I love scarves, but I don't know how to wear them." So I was just doing a demonstration here on how to wear them.
I must admit, before we started recording, I did try a couple of different, styles and ways, because I'm not sure either.
Well, what I told her in the message is you can wear a scarf any way you want to. It depends on the length and the look and everything. You can wrap it around your neck, and I might do that later because this house has no insulation. Look, that's great. Yay. For those of
Oh,
you who are just listening, Nick has wrapped the scarf around his
there you
head like
go.
a hoodie.
Yeah, you can. I always think of it this as a kind of a, I don't know, like a refugee look or something like that. Like just a, yeah, but much colder places than where I live. Although it is getting cold here now in the northwest of England. We're getting into scarf weather, and I haven't had a scarf for years. I can't remember the last time I had one. So when this arrived in the post, it was not a day too soon, and I was so grateful to receive it. So I'm very happy to be wearing it,
Oh,
even
that's good.
indoors. It is
Great.
needed.
Yes. Well, me too, because Thanksgiving, the American Thanksgiving is always on the fourth Thursday of November. And my brother got a fire ready in the fireplace, but we didn't light it because it was really warm. But 2 days later, it went into very cold weather. And then we had a hard freeze a couple of nights ago. Yesterday, I was out surveying the damage. And there's always a kind of wherever you live, whatever climate you live in, when you see the hard freeze effects, and there's my little marigolds all shriveled up, and I had some cherry tomatoes and they froze on the vine, and I had a little bell pepper just about ready to pick, and we didn't know it was going to be a hard freeze. So a lot survived. Most of my herbs made it through it, but the basil's gone. So.
Rest
Yeah.
in peace, Basil.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we're ready to dive in. Have we done it all? All the preamble? Oh,
Yes, I think so. I think
okay.
in part two, this will be part three of our discussion on that hideous strength now. And I think in part two, I gave a nice sort of just a what would you call it, promo of where I am online and what I do and that sort of thing. So I don't think that needs covering again. So I would say we're about ready to dive in, and we're at chapter 9.
Okay. Good deal. Well, I've got some notes going there, but let's see. I'm going to let you start by setting the stage here for what's going on 9. The title of this is The Saracen's Head.
We should make sure to that you read the title because I think I said in the last video my edition doesn't have chapter titles.
Okay.
The Saracen's Head. That's an okay. So
Hmm.
what's a Saracen? To me, a Saracen, the first and only instance I can recall of that word was on a Saturday night television show called Gladiators, where you would have these super buff pro athletes and they would play a bunch of games against the contestants and they would, do these physical competitions and eliminate the contestants. And then the contestants would sort of try and beat the gladiators. It was a Saturday night thing. I think there was an American Gladiators as well, a similar sort of competition. And there was one of the gladiators was called Saracen,
Huh.
and so that's the only time I recall hearing the word. I'm not sure what it means.
Well, I didn't look it up and I have no idea what it means either. So let's take a stab.
Okay, I'll race you.
Saracen was
How do you
commonly
spell it?
used
That'd be
in
nice.
Saracen. The word Saracen was commonly used in medieval Europe to refer to a person who lived in or near what the ancient Romans knew as Arabia Petraea and Arabia Deserta. Its
Mm,
original meaning in Greek and Latin is not known with certainty. By the early medieval period, it had come to be associated with the Arabian tribes. Okay, there you go. Following the rise of Islam, which occurred in Arabia, the word's definition evolved to refer not only to Arabs but to Muslims as well. It eventually became the standard adjective among European Christians for all people and things from the Muslim world, regardless of whether they were Arab in origin. Well, hey, that's kind of important for us to know, isn't it? I'm glad we
yeah,
looked
I'm,
it
I'm
up.
glad. Yeah, I'm glad we stopped there to check it out, and that makes sense because where we left off was Mark going to meet the head of the Nice, and he was being ushered in by Philostrato to a room which was on the other side of a wall that had lots of tubes and dials and I imagine sort of fluids and steam and lots of activity and there was a door in the wall and that was where the chapter ended. And so chapter 9, the Saracen's Head, picks up and we're with Jane. And Jane and the director and Grace Ironwood are having this discussion about Jane's most recent dream. And this is a really interesting kind of narrative device in that we're not in the room with Mark, so we don't see it through Mark's eyes. We actually hear about what goes on in there from Jane by way of one of her prophetic, they're not prophetic visions, are they? Really, they're not prophecy. They're more like I don't know what the right word would be, but she sees things that have happened, not that are going to happen. I think that's right.
Maybe
Um,
we could call it post cognition.
Post cognition, yeah,
Well, if
not
yeah,
precog, it's postcog.
yeah. It's still
And
helpful.
still useful. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't get to see the future. You don't get to change the events, but you do get to see what's going on in other places. And so she's telling the director and Grace Ironwood about what she saw in there. And she says she saw a face floating in front of her. It was a face, not a head. There was a beard and nose and eyes, but it had colored glasses on. I thought the face was a mask tied onto a kind of balloon thing, but it wasn't exactly. It looked a bit like a man wearing a sort of turban. What it really was a head, the rest of a head, which had the top part of the skull taken off, and then, as if something inside had boiled over, a great big mass which bulged out from inside what was left of the skull, wrapped in some kind of composition stuff, very thin stuff. You could see it twitch. And in my fright, I remember thinking, oh, kill it, put it out of its pain. And so it's this sort of horrific monstrosity of science that she's witnessed, the head. And we find out that when they talk about the head of the nice, they are literally talking about a head.
Yes,
I don't think but that's this is the first part that's revealed. I think it's
I
sort of
think
hinted
so.
at,
Yeah,
yeah. And so
yeah.
that's what we find out. The head of the nice is literally a head, and so she goes on to explain how Mark is in this room, and then Mark he passes out. This thing is so monstrous and hideous that he freaks out, and I think he faints and falls on the ground. And she tries to warn, she tries to speak out in her dream, but she can't because she's just witnessing it. She's not actually there. And then there's a conversation between the good guys, the goodies, Dr. Dimble and the company about what this could be. Or maybe that comes a little bit later. But yeah, it's a little bit later actually in this chapter. They talk about the, what it could be. Is it possible? Is it is it scientifically feasible to have this head living and talking and moving around and that ties into the discussion in the last episode that we had where these kinds of experiments have been done in by maniacal scientists chopping heads off creatures and filling them with wires and tubes and trying to keep them alive. And this is actually a real world thing that C.S. Lewis is referring to and making use of in the story, isn't it?
Hmm. It's the big Soviet experiments, and it also kind of ties in a way to the vivisection that was coming into common use in experiments and studies. This is a quick aside, but I forgot to share this with you earlier, and I just remembered it now. You know, we looked up several different names, but we didn't get that much into Studdock. So it's Mark and Jane Studdock, and we talked about, average Mark and average Jane. But Darren sent us a little homework there on this. So he said, legal mark, a recognized symbol or signature indicating consent or ownership. And this was interesting on the surname. A Studdock is a type of metal fastener commonly used in construction and engineering. It is essentially a short rod or bolt with a thread at both ends and is used to attach and strengthen structural components. Studducks can be found in various materials, including steel and aluminum, and they are typically utilized to secure two or more parts together, often in high stress applications, commonly used in machinery assembly and buildings. Overall, Studducks offer a robust solution for creating strong, stable connections in various applications.
Mm.
And then he said, and this is interesting, he said, a little voice inside says this could be a Noam Chomsky type character, too. So we'll
Who,
see how this unfolds.
so Mark could be a Noam Chomsky type character. Mark
That's
Studick.
well, he
Mm.
says a little voice. I mean, Noam Chomsky is famous for his linguist studies here,
Hmm.
too. So I don't know.
But
We can get him
but it
to
ties in
elaborate on that.
because what I was thinking of hearing that description, and that was great because I hadn't even thought to look it up, is the connecting of two things.
Hmm.
And what this a large part of this story is all about marriage, the man and the woman
Hmm.
being connected, and so and this and the adventure, the trials and tribulations that Jane and Mark go through with regards their marriage, and what we're going to see in these chapters that we'll talk about today is that each one of them has a quite a profound transformative experience contemplating and facing death. That's coming up pretty soon. But yeah, that makes sense. I bet every name, if you were to look it up, would have some relevance, and none of it would be accidental. I think that's probably a safe bet. So, staying with Mark, the next section of the chapter, we move to Mark, and he wakes up the next morning after he met the head, and he's got a sore head. He remembers that he fell over and hurt his head, and then his memory comes back to him. And there's a good definition here, which is quoting a poet. I don't know which poet, but C.S. Lewis writes, and then, as one of the poets says, he discovered in his mind an inflammation swollen and deformed, his memory. And then Mark rejects it. Oh, impossible, not to be accepted for a moment. It had been a nightmare. It must be shoved away. It would vanish away now that he was fully awake. It was an absurdity. Once in delirium, he had seen the front part of a horse by itself, with no body or hind legs, running across a lawn, had felt it ridiculous at the very moment of seeing it, but not the less horrible. This was an absurdity of the same sort. A head without any body underneath. That's any body. A head that could speak when they turned on the air, and the artificial saliva with taps in the next room. His own head began to throb so hard that he had to stop thinking. He goes on as well that, and we learn a lot about Mark in this next section. It says that he could not, as they say, take it. He was very ashamed of this, for he wished to be considered one of the tough ones. But the truth is that his toughness was only of the will, not of the nerves, and the virtues he had almost succeeded in banishing from his mind still lived, if only negatively, and as weaknesses in his body. He approved vivisection, but had never worked in a dissecting room. He recommended that certain classes of people should be gradually eliminated, but he had never been there when a small shopkeeper went to the workhouse, or a starved old woman of the governess type came to the very last day and hour and minute in the cold attic. He knew nothing about the last half cup of cocoa drunk slowly 10 days before. That last sentence there really hit me. you know, I, it was so well written. That last half cup of cocoa drunk slowly 10 days before.
Mm.
So he's got opinions, he's got views, but when it comes to the crunch, he doesn't have any of that direct life experience of what these things actually are in reality and how they affect the people or the beings that they affect. So it says later, and it says later, oh, it says here a little bit further down. It must be remembered that in Mark's mind, hardly one rag of noble thought, Christian or pagan, had a secure lodging. His education had been neither scientific nor classical, merely, quote, modern.
Mhm.
The severities both of abstraction and of high human tradition had passed him by. It says, he was a man of straw, a glib examinee in subjects that require no exact knowledge, and the first hint of a real threat to his bodily life knocked him sprawling. And then he has to have a whiskey so that he can so that he can muster the courage to get up and shave and get dressed. So yeah, he's a modern man. He's been through the modern education. He's had the most up to date indoctrination of the time. And what has it made him? It's made him malleable. It's turned him into somebody who doesn't value life experience. He lives in his head. It's all theory, and he's not basing his views and opinions on the real world and the reality around him.
Yeah, there's I mentioned to you earlier today that on my morning walk I had started listening to, and I did end up finishing it later this morning, an audio recording of The Abolition of Man. And this was really a long essay that C.S. Lewis wrote in 1943. And he does a non-fictional elaboration on some of the ideas that he's doing here fictionally. And that included what he thought about the education system and how it was the all modern education was really aimed at the destruction of man's soul. and
Wow.
his emotions and the things that made him human. And the first, let's see if I did manage to pull it up here. The very first chapter of three short sections in this essay is called Men Without Chests. So that the head of the Saracen's head is kind of an
Mm,
elaboration on men without chests. Because what he's saying is that the head has spirit and reason, the stomach are your instincts and your appetites. And you've got to have the chest as the moderator, the go between for pure instinct and pure appetite and your reason. And so without the heart and the emotion and the the human, the man, then what is essentially human has been eliminated. And
mm,
he started off the essay talking about a book that had been written recently in England, so the early 40s. And sorry, I got a little notice there. So if you hear the beeping, that's what that is. And that was his critique was these men may be well-meaning, these so-called academics or scholars, in what they're trying to convey to the young first form student. And I don't know the English system, so I don't know what first form would be, but I got the idea that they were young, but not university level. So
mm. Probably okay. So maybe what we would call college is sort of 16 to 18, maybe this kind of age.
that's what it struck me as. And he was demonstrating there right at the beginning that what they were showing was supposed to be a criticism of a piece of literature. And he said, we all know that literary criticism is a difficult thing to do, but they haven't managed to do that. All they have done, and then he went forward to demonstrate it, is subject the student to their own subjective worldview, not objective, their own subjective worldview, their own idea of what was right or ethical at that time, not based in anything that came earlier, like what you might call natural law, or he ends up elaborating on that and calling it the Tao, the
Mm,
great all that is everything. And he says, and contained in that is natural law. That's your objective truth. And so it was just interesting that uses the school system to show how it's going to be done, how the man is going to be eliminated. And like I've told you several times, you'll be seeing that a lot when you get to foundations, their power and influence. So,
well, that reminds me though of even between two ages by Zbigniew. In there, he says that universities have taken over from corporations and churches. So he wrote that in the 70s, a little bit further along the
yeah.
agenda and the timeline. But yeah, he says that in there, and he, I can't remember exactly the wording, but he sort of says the universities are the new churches and corporations. So it's quite an interesting idea. I forget like the full concept and the argument and the
Mhm.
point, the bigger point that he mentions that in, but it was one of the notes that I put down as these are the prime, I think, um, primary institutions of control, indoctrination, and brainwashing now. Because I was talking to my brother fairly recently, and we were explaining, we were reflecting on how when we were growing up, the easiest, most natural, normal path, i.e., the one that everyone around us was doing, our peers and and that was put in front of us was university. And there was really no strong voices or advocates in our life for anything other than that. And so you were just kind of carried along by the current. And then off to university you go, and then that's another 3 years, and you kind of have your parties, and you write your essays, and you get whatever you get at the end of it. but not necessarily anything useful or applicable to life or any life skills that are going to help you make a living or be a useful member of society or any of that stuff. So, but that's what's aimed at the young people. That's what young people are just pushed towards, I think, by most people, by the mainstream, let's say.
Mhm.
So, yes, I want to read that essay definitely, and I'm glad it's a short one. I thought it was a whole book, but if you listen to it, um,
The complete book was about an hour and a half reading.
right, oh,
So,
nice. Speaking of school, Mark wakes up, gets himself ready, and he goes out. And this is where he starts to have regrets for having married Jane and bringing her into what he's now embroiled in. So what we'll see over the coming chapters is Mark's conscience starting to kick in. It's
mhm.
been sort of latent up to now, and it faces some more challenges yet to come, but it starts to awaken within him. And this is kind of one of the earliest gleamings of that. It says, for the first time in his life, a gleam of something like disinterested love came into his mind. He wished he had never married her, never dragged her into this whole outfit of horrors, which was apparently to be his life. Um, and then he meets Miss Hardcastle, and it says his feeling was that not since he had been bullied at school had he known what it was to hate and dread anyone with every nerve of his body, as he now hated and dreaded this woman. Um, so that's the school link there. Mark's quite, um, and that's a revelation about Mark. He was bullied at school, right? That's another thing that we learn about him. And she tells him that they want to bring Jane here to the institute, and she kind of makes a vague threat. She says Jane's not very well. It's come to their attention she's ill, and she says as well. And Mark complains, "You haven't yet told me what she said or did." And Miss Hardcastle replies, "I wouldn't like to have anyone belonging to me popped into Edgestowe Asylum, especially now that we're getting our emergency powers. They'll be using the ordinary patients experimentally, you know. Whereas if you just sign this form, I'll run over after lunch and have her here this evening." And Mark says he rejects this. He wants to go and get her himself. He's decided to bring her here because he's recognized now that his life's in danger, and this is the sort of only option that he has, but he wants to go and do it himself. And then Miss Hardcastle warns him, "You're in a damn dangerous position already. You'll about do yourself in if you're absent without leave now." And then he kind of, he's starting to grow a bit of backbone. His conscience is coming in, and he sort of says, "No, I'm going to leave." And then he sets off, start stomping, and he's on his way out of the grounds at the end of this section. And then this strange thing happens, which I think we touched on a little bit, and I want to know what you think's going on here because it happens again a little later. But as Mark's leaving the grounds, it says he was out of the grounds now. He was crossing the road. He had entered a belt of trees. He stopped suddenly. Something impossible was happening. There was a figure before him on the path, a tall, very tall, slightly stooping figure, sauntering and humming a dreary tune. The deputy director himself. And he's just left the deputy director behind him, right? In one moment, all that brittle hardihood was gone from Mark's mood. He turned back. He stood in the road. This seemed to him the worst pain that he ever felt. Then, tired, so tired that he felt the weak tears filling his eyes, he walked very slowly back into Belbury. So, yeah, he sort of marches away from the deputy director, storms out of the grounds, only to be met by the deputy director coming in the opposite direction. And this freaks him out. He turns around and he goes back. Um, and this happens again later on, but with a different result. Maybe we should like reflect on that when that next section comes up. I don't know. What did you think about this part?
Mm. Well, I think we can elaborate on it more, but I
Hmm.
think it's the beginning. It's his first, it's our first inkling as readers. It's planting the seed that maybe there's something different about the deputy director, that
Yeah.
I mean, because what appears to happen to Mark isn't really possible, and yet it happened. And like you said, there's going to be a couple of other instances, and a few chapters later, there's a very odd scene between Wither and Frost.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That I didn't.
Yeah.
I read that two or three times, and I thought I'm just gonna have to ask Melissa what's going on because
It's
I
really, it's
really
disturbing.
weird. But for now, we go back to Jane, and she's hanging out with Mr. McPhee, who is the director, Ransom's one of his closest allies because he's a skeptic. And he's objective and he's very logical and he analyzes things. He doesn't get caught up in things that he can't prove and test and rationalize. Okay. And he's talking with Jane and they have a whole conversation about, uh, is that right? Yeah. He's talking to Jane about her dream
Mhm.
and what she's seen and whether or not it's possible. Um,
There's something too there as they're discussing the dream, they're talking about Eldils and they're talking about Eldils um, on different planets. And remember, McPhee is the Scottish skeptic.
yeah.
He's the skeptic of the group. But there's something here that's going to come up later, and I just want to mention it. Let's see. As they're discussing the Eldils, I don't know, I'm not sure who's talking here. I think it might be McPhee. These creatures are not planetary creatures at all. Supposing them to exist, you are to conceive them floating about the depth of space, though they may alight on a planet here and there, like a bird alighting on a tree, you understand. There's some of them, he says, are more or less permanently attached to particular planets, but they're not native there. They're just a clean, different kind of thing. So this whole concept is kind of weird to Jane. So there's silence there. And then she asked, they are, I gather, more or less friendly. That is certainly the director's idea about them, with one important exception. What's that? The Eldils have for many centuries concentrated on our own planet. We seem to have had no luck at all in choosing our particular complement of parasites. And that concept of parasites linked to the Eldils, which we can also think of as angels, it's going to come up later on in our discussion, a few chapters from now, in a way. At least I'm going to make it come up. So,
Nice. The other couple of bits in this section that I wanted to draw out as well was how he McPhee is he questions the ransom's course of action or lack thereof. And he says, it may have occurred to you to wonder, Mrs. Sturrock, how any man in his senses thinks we are going to defeat a powerful conspiracy by sitting here growing winter vegetables and training performing bears. It is a question I have propounded on more than one occasion. The answer is always the same. We're waiting for orders, and these are orders from the El dealer. But this just links to the wholesomeness that we talked about in the last section. This whole group, they're they're taking care of each other, looking after animals. They're living in a very cozy sort of household situation where they're cooperative and they have this real strong sense of family and it's so wholesome and that's just part of it as well because we often talk about or I do as on my channel the importance of the little things that you can do to maintain your humanity and whether that's a little creative output whether that's growing some food some herbs or some plants flowers or there's just these all these little things that we can do in our lives add up and matter and can save us and I like that C.S. Lewis has folded that in to his depiction of this the good guys. And the other
that's
thing I
a,
like,
oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that is very important because this comes up over and over with him. We see that the nice, we increasingly see just how detached they are from anything human. Now we've seen the Saracen's Head. We know that that's something that C.S. Lewis was elaborating on from The Men Without Chess. So it's they're the basic human functions, all of the other organs needed, digestion, reproduction, those are all missing.
Mm.
And so they're taking us into a world that has been scrubbed cleaned, anesthetized, and sanitized. And we get to see very, very human things with our trained bear and our winter vegetables.
Yeah, and the other thing that they mentioned that I really liked when Jane and McPhee are talking, Jane, she's kind of defensive of the director, and she gets angry at McPhee for questioning and being skeptical. And she says to him, she has a little dig, and she says, "There's such a thing as loyalty," says Jane. McPhee, who had been carefully shutting up the snuff box, suddenly looked up with 100 Covenanters in his eyes. "There is, ma'am," he said. "As you get older, you will learn that it is a virtue too important to be lavished on individual personalities." And I like that because it just made me think of people who care about the bigger things, such as truth or love, or these capital T nouns that are intangible but real and affect us, and we can align ourselves with them. And that was just a little nod to that. It's like there's bigger forces and bigger things at play that we can be in service of than another personality, just another person, one
Hmm.
person, right? So the
Hmm.
director, Ransom, has aligned himself with God, and McPhee's sort of making the same point. Is kind of like, okay, you're wowed by the Ransom because she's still kind of, her world is still unmade, and she's still sort of overawed at his kingliness. But he's sort of saying there's bigger things, and I just like that little exchange there. It gives you another insight into the group. Um, and then the section ends with this conversation about how the director's not getting older and if he's going to die. And Camila, at this point, she's talking to, says that he'll probably just be taken into the heavens again. This has happened to one or two, perhaps six people since the world began.
Hmm.
And then she asks, "What is he?" And Camila says, "He's a man, my dear, and he is the Pendragon of Logres. This house, all of us here, Mr. Bultitude, the bear, and Pinch, the cat, are all that's left of the Logres. All the rest has become merely Britain." Yeah, and so that's who the good guys are. That's who
Hmm.
is and Logres is I pulled that up. I did look that one up, and this is the name for King Arthur's Britain, King Arthur's realm in the south and east of England. It's pronounced a few different ways. Logris, I think, is one, but it's spelt here with an S, with an E, so Logres. And there's a few different things on Wikipedia about where the word itself comes from. It might be a Welsh word, and then there's something here about it being about the land of ogres, logres in the Detroit's poem Percival, the Story of the Grail. But it's just this linking back to something older and ancient that is almost gone, that is almost extinguished. And this little homely family, this little group, they're the ragtag bunch. They're the last remaining members of this for now. Until
This is a good point. I said that we would talk about the denizens' names, their first names, uh, but we haven't done that so far. But her name is Camilla. So it's Camilla who just said, "He's a man, my dear," and the Pendragon of Logres. And and Camilla's husband is Arthur. So we get Arthur. of the Round Table, and we get
Mm.
Camilla of Camelot.
Oh,
So,
okay. Yeah,
yeah,
Camilla,
so,
Camelot, Arthur, Round Table. That's it. Because I got Arthur, but I didn't get Camelot from Camilla.
well, I don't know. Maybe that's not what it means, but I like it.
No, let's just say it is.
All right.
The next section, they're talking about the dream, and McPhee is saying it's an old experiment with animals' heads. You cut off a cat's head maybe and throw the body away. You can keep the head going a bit if you supply it with blood and the right pressure. Miss Ironwood says a German tried it before the First War with the head of a criminal. It failed. The head simply decayed in the ordinary way. Um, and then they talk about why it looked like it had this. Um, what did she describe it as? A sort of balloon on the top of the head. And McPhee's talking here again. He says once they'd got it kept alive, the first thing that would occur to boys like them, meaning the nice, would be to increase its brain. They'd try all sorts of stimulants, and then maybe they'd ease open the skull cap and just, well, let it boil over, as you might say. A cerebral hypertrophy artificially induced to support a superhuman power of ideation. Um, and then Dimble says, then that's what we are up against. A criminal's brain swollen to superhuman proportions and experiencing a mode of consciousness which we can't imagine, but which is presumably a consciousness of agony and hatred. Deniston says it tells us one thing straight away that the enemy movement is international. To get that head, they must have been hand in glove with at least one foreign police force because this head is the head of a criminal who was in a newspaper headline and in Jane's first dream right at the beginning of the book. And I forget what country it was. Can you remember? But I
I
forget what
don't
country it was
remember
where it
the
was. Maybe it
country
didn't say.
either. But he was charged with killing his wife, right?
Yeah, he was a prestigious scientist of some kind. He was charged with killing his wife, and then he was beheaded.
Was he
And then
Spanish? I don't
the nice
remember.
got hold of his head, pumped it full of tubes and artificial saliva. That little detail, artificial saliva, it like makes me shiver. Like, ugh, just the thought of it. Um, and then the director Ransom, he says that this means that if the technique is successful, the Belbury people have, for all practical purposes, discovered a way of making themselves immortal. There was a moment's silence. He continued, it is the beginning of what is really a new species, the chosen heads, who never die. They will call it the next step in evolution. And henceforward, all the creatures that you and I call human are mere candidates for admission to the new species, or else its slaves. Perhaps it's food. The emergence of the bodiless men, said Dimble. And this is linking really nicely to the abolition of man concept of the chestless men, isn't it?
It also ties in really well with the real history that I did with Judy in Disguise with Glasses, because she brought in the concept of the avatars, who the ableism, the disabled who
Right.
and now you got these avatars who float around in space and they don't have legs. They're just torsos. So we're just one step closer to being a floating head.
Yeah. A brain in a jar.
Yep.
And the conversation goes on. They kind of this chapter is really just revealing. It's just revealing things about the plot, isn't it? There's not a
Hmm.
lot of action going on. It's a lot of conversations. You're learning about both sides of this war because they've both called themselves armies, haven't they?
Hmm.
Earlier in the book. But there's a bit here that I liked a little bit further on where Ransom says, "I am the director." That's that section. "I am the director," said Ransom, smiling. "Do you think I would claim the authority I do if the relation between us depended either on your choice or mine? You never chose me. I never chose you. Even the great Oyeresu, whom I serve, never chose me. I came into their worlds by what seemed at first a chance, as you came to me, as the very animals in this house first came to it. You and I have not started or devised this. It has descended on us, sucked us into itself, if you like. It is no doubt an organization, but we are not the organizers. And that is why I have no authority to give any one of you permission to leave my household. And I like this bit because it speaks to what um, that McPhee's other comment speaks to is something higher, bigger,
Hmm.
more grand, a design, a plan, a purpose, you know, be, behind things, and aligning yourself with it, submitting to it, whether this is the will of the creator or however people, fate, destiny. I don't, people have different ways of framing it and labeling it, but it's kind of tantamount to the same thing. It's embracing your purpose and your place. And and we've talked a little bit before, and I sent you this a picture of this little section to describe sort of how I feel about what I do. I just feel like it's the right thing for me to be doing when I make videos and live stream and get these books and read them and talk about them with people and encourage other people to do the same. To me, it just feels like that's what I'm called to do. Um, to what end and for what purpose, I'm not sure exactly. But it's just it just has this like it's not my choice. Just in
Hmm.
the same way that when I've written songs in the past, I don't feel like I've written them. I feel like they just were arrived through me. And I've talked about this kind of sensation before of just sort of more like being a conduit rather than a creator. And sometimes I do feel like I'm the creator, and that's all good. But then other times I just look on something that I've done, and I'm like, that it doesn't even feel like it was me. So it's just interesting that there's just acknowledging these higher powers, if you want to call them that, or intentions, or wills, or plans, um, and then just submitting to it and aligning yourself with it. Uh, it's 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 exactly what Jane doesn't want to do. That's the conflict for her. She doesn't want to submit to anyone, no matter what, until she meets Ransom and her whole world isn't done, as we covered in the last reading, right?
Yeah. We've talked about that a little bit. I know exactly what you're describing there. I feel that too, that I'm just here to, I don't know. I don't take credit. I
Yeah,
can't take,
it doesn't feel like people might send me a kind email or like, oh, what you're doing is good, and I might get some um just some generous words from somebody, and I just think like I'm not doing anywhere near enough. Like what I'm doing, this is not me. Whatever it is that that person is seeing, I just don't feel like I can take credit for it. I just don't. It's not kind of it's something bigger and outside and beyond me, and that I'm just sort of I don't know. I can't even put it into words. It's
well,
hard, but
there's something that's going to come up in a later chapter that I'll just wait, but there's something that will come up that I think gives us an opportunity to verbalize that feeling
hmm.
more clearly, or at least it will me.
Okay. So continuing with the chapter, there's another section about Bragdon Wood and what's going on at Bragdon Wood. If you recall, very early in the book, the university which Mark works at is presented with this question, and they are all delphied into the sale of Bragdon Wood to the Nice, which then descends upon the town, takes it over, and starts polluting the river and building in this area. And there's a ancient well there, and then it becomes clear that there's something buried there that the Nice want to get their hands on, which is why that's the only location that they want. And so the next section is kind of talking about that. There's a little bit more exposition about the group, the good guys, the goodies, which is that they C.S. Lewis says, Dimble and the Denistons shared between them a knowledge of Arthurian Britain which orthodox scholarship will probably not reach for some centuries. They knew that Edgestow lay in what had been the very heart of ancient Logres, and that the village of Curhardy preserved the name of Ozana La Curhardy, and that a historical Merlin had once worked in what was now Bragdon Wood. And so they're discussing um, this character of Merlin. And we kind of learn later, I don't know if we talked about it in the last reading or not, but we learn that that Merlin is buried here in Bragdon Wood. And this is what the Nice are interested in.
Mhm.
And so kicks off this race basically to get to meet Merlin, to get him, and to sort of, because they feel that he's going to wake up and join the Nice, and that the Nice are going to chop his head off and start using it to do whatever they do with the chopped off heads, because and that bit's coming up soon as well. What consciousness they're actually um channeling or tapping into with this technological monstrosity that they've concocted.
There's an
But
interest. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, no, please.
Well, what I like is right after you have just told us what they're doing, what they want to do with Merlin, why they want to dig him up, Ransom agrees with what they might possibly be going to do. And he said he thought that Merlin's art was the last survival of something older and different, something brought to Western Europe after the fall of Numenor. And we find out later that Numenor is true West. Um, but okay, so the fall of Numenor and going back to an era in which the general relations of mind and matter on this planet had been other than those we know. It had probably differed from Renaissance magic profoundly. It had possibly, though this was doubtful, been less guilty. It had certainly been more effective. For Paracelsus and Agrippa and the rest had achieved little or nothing. Bacon himself, no enemy to magic except on this account, reported that the magicians attained not to greatness and certainty of works. The whole Renaissance outburst of forbidden arts had, it seemed, been a method of losing one's soul on singularly unfavorable terms, but the older art had been a different proposition. But if the only possible attraction of Bragdon lay in its association with the last vestiges of Atlantean magic, this told the company something else. It told them that the nice, at its core, was not concerned solely with modern or materialistic forms of power. It told the director, in fact, that there was eldilic energy and eldilic knowledge behind it. It was, of course, another question whether its human members knew of the dark powers who were the real organizers. And in the long run, this question was not perhaps important. As Ransom himself had said more than once, whether they know it or whether they don't, much the same sort of things are going to happen. It's not a question of how the Bellbury people are going to act. The dark Eldils will see to that, but of how they will think about their actions. So that kind of what I like here that C.S. Lewis is getting to in this novel is something that Alan Watt talks about a lot in the or writes about in the Cutting Through series of novels. That something else that's behind what we see, and sometimes in their own words, and sometimes Alan's own thoughts about what they say they are. And here is a section, I think this is in the first volume, the first Cutting Through volume. And he's talking about how the lower level Masons are used and they're brought up and they're told they're in on something. And I saw a great parallel here because this is how the nice brings their men up. They want to make them think in vague sort of terms that are never explained really that they're doing something very important. So Alan wrote, next, his ego is further inflated by his dawning understanding, the falling into place of various symbols and statements that he and his brothers of similar degrees are gods. They believe that they are the most evolved beings on the planet with the right to plan the destiny of the human species. Naturally, having overcome the world, they don't need to follow the laws of their brethren predecessors created for the profane. However, they are told they now have a duty to manage the poor beasts of the field. Such duties are very well paid and demand that brothers of influence must give hiring preference to brother masons. This applies to promotions, pay raises, etc. The Creator, they say, left the creation in an imperfect condition. It is up to those who have become perfected to push humanity to the utmost complete being he can be. This is called doing the Father's work and the great work. In one sense, it promotes secular humanism, a world where everyone will be born with a specific function and a life of service to society, better known as scientific socialism. This would mean for anyone who has studied it the death of individuality, spontaneity, and personal creativity on a much higher level. So here we are up with the deputy director. On a much higher level, the completion of man is to be done scientifically. To prepare the world for this, chaos must be unleashed within society so that new laws may be introduced. The media and entertainment industry must prepare the mind of the people for the imperative need for a complete new system and a new you. And this is really what the nice are up to. And this is what Mark has been doing with his PR that he's writing. He's preparing the minds of people to accept, well, we have to have a scientific approach to this. And so I think as we've got the little foreshadowings of Eldil and parasites and what did that wither just do? He was just over there, but now he's over here coming from the opposite direction. What's that about? So
Mm,
we're getting these glimpses that they are practicing a different kind of technique that might look like magic.
mm.
And that there's one thing I said I just listened to the audiobook today, so but I did pull up a PDF that I found of The Abolition of Man, but I think I can kind of uh, mess up a quote here. I'll try my best to mess it up. But C.S. Lewis wrote that this system coming into view was about some men gaining power over all other men, using nature as only the tool. So that's only the tool to be able to achieve this domination over other people. So that's in a number of ways, whether, that's what the scientific socialism is all about. Is it using nature to tell you that the planet is heating up faster than we can keep it cool? Or is it using nature to tell you that maybe you were born in the wrong body? Maybe you're not really a man. So that is what the nice does. It's the use of nature, not because they are in obedience to natural law, they are in high defiance. So anyway, just some more themes to toss out.
That's good. And it aligns really nicely with the end of this chapter, the very final paragraph, which is a long one.
But
And
a
it's
good one.
taught.
I marked the whole thing off.
Yeah, yeah, but a good one. I know I'm the same. I've just aligned down the whole side of it. And the director is kind of with furrowed brow reflecting on this situation and realizing what it means and realizing what's at stake. And this is where he says that the enemy had bought Bragdon Wood to find Merlin, and if they found him, they would reawaken him, and the old druid would inevitably cast his lot with the new planners. What could prevent his doing so? He says he's reflecting, doubtless, that this had been the will of the dark Eldila for centuries. The physical sciences, good and innocent in themselves, had already, in Ransom's time, begun to be warped, had been subtly maneuvered in a certain direction. Despair of objective truth had been increasingly insinuated into the scientists, indifference to it, and a concentration upon mere power had been the result. Dreams of the far future destiny of man were dragging up from its shallow and unquiet grave the old dream of man as God. That's
Mm-hmm.
man as perfect being, isn't it? That's
Mm-hmm.
perfected man. The very experiences of the dissecting room and the pathological laboratory were breeding a conviction that the stifling of all deep set repugnances was the first essential for progress. So that's put your morals aside, put your squeamishness aside, put uh, your any hesitancy, any concern about harming, other creatures. You have to ditch all that, right? Those deep set repugnances. You have to. They're just feelings.
Mm-hmm.
As they say later on, they're just chemical reactions, right? And this is what Mark is told, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So continuing with this section, they were choosing the first moment in history that this could be done. Um, and he talks about how earlier scientists had an inherited morality that would have prevented them from doing what's happening now. So there had to be this time to work
Yeah.
on breaking down people's morality and condition people to uh, to go along with this kind of agenda. It said it says perhaps few or none of the people at Belbury knew what was happening, but once it happened, they would be like straw in fire. So they're useful idiots. They're being
Mm-hmm.
used by these
Mm-hmm.
dark Eldila, these dark forces. Um, what should they regard as too obscene? No, sorry, let me go back a bit. What should they find incredible since they believed no longer in a rational universe?
Mm-hmm.
What should they regard as too obscene since they held that all morality was a mere subjective byproduct of the physical and economic situations of men? So he's talking about the danger of subjective morality there, which came up for me in on Wikipedia when I was reading about humanism for one of my live streams. I was looking up humanism, and that's what came through strongly was it's basically moral relativity. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of, well, whatever makes you happy and whatever you need and your interpretation of things, then that's good. And that's what humanism does. And that's what it kind of has at its core. And then there was even a section I'm remembering now on the Wikipedia's page of the United Nations, and there's a section on there, or there was, who knows if it's there anymore, criticisms of the UN, and the very number one thing on that list of criticism of the UN was moral relativity.
Mm.
So it is it's just very damaging and corrosive over the long term. But continuing with this section, the time was ripe. From the point of view which is accepted in hell, the whole history of our earth had led up to this moment. There was now at last a real chance for fallen man to shake off that limitation of his powers which mercy had imposed upon him as a protection from the full results of his fall. If this succeeded, hell would be at last incarnate. Bad men, while still in the body, still crawling on this little globe, would enter that state which heretofore they had entered only after death, would have the dire, I didn't get this word, diuturnity and power of evil spirits. So I guess diuturnity is something like eternity or everlasting or long lasting or something like that.
I don't know. I'm not going to
No,
hazard a guess. I'll look it
no,
up
you
though.
look it up.
But
Okay.
carry on.
I'll read, yeah, I'll finish the quote. Nature, all over the globe of Tellus, would become their slave. As you were mentioning,
Mm-hmm.
it's not about living in accordance with nature, it's about dominating and controlling nature and gaining it mastery for power.
Okay.
And of that,
Oh, go ahead.
let me finish this. It's just a half a sentence. And of that dominion, no end. Before the end of time itself, could be certainly foreseen.
That's
So
a
that's what's at stake
yeah.
in this war.
Okay. So you were right with your hazarded guess. Long
Oh, good.
duration, lastingness.
Yes, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. So it's
Yeah.
this like when bad men, even bad men will die eventually. Even though
Yes.
Henry Kissinger made it
Yeah.
to 100, and they do die eventually. But if you can artificially keep them going and keep them alive and sever them from their biological limitations,
I
keep that.
shudder to think of the room where those heads are kept.
Oh, I'm just thinking of talking about heads now. Somebody in the chat, I was premiering our previous chat on my channel just earlier today, and somebody in the chat there was talking about the film Mars Attacks, and they were mentioning it in reference to the chopping off of the head and keeping it alive because there's a character in that series who gets film who gets have you ever seen that film? It's a comedy film. It's
I
very bad
have.
from
I
the
don't
you have.
remember it. I don't. Oh, I maybe I do. If you keep talking, it might come back to me.
So
But
1996 comedy. The cast is crazy. The amount of people they got in there. They got Tom Jones, Pierce Brosnan, they got Jack Nicholson, they got all sorts of big names in there. And it's a sort of spoof film about Martians invading Earth. And these are early CGI Martians, so they don't look very good. But they've got these gigantic brains, and they're in little glass
I remember
helmets.
that part. Yeah.
Yeah, and they talk like like when they talk to each other. And
And the thing that's like their kryptonite or acid on him is that Indian love song.
yeah, and in fact, I'm pretty sure Alan mentioned that film in a
Oh, I'm sure he
talk
did. Yeah.
because he talked about
Yeah.
how the people who live rurally and have guns are portrayed.
hmm Yeah.
And he
I
talked
remember
and
watching it with him. I just don't remember the details of
yeah.
the movie that well, but
So there's a character in there. She gets her head chopped off. She's experimented, and it gets sewn onto her little Chihuahua type dog. The heads get
oh,
swapped.
yes, yes, yes. I remember that now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Wasn't she the first
Heidi,
lady?
maybe, or
Yeah.
I can't remember. But
Okay.
Heidi in the chat had mentioned that this happened in. But I'm just thinking now as well of the head, the head of the knives,
Uh-huh.
skull off, artificially stimulated brain growth. That's what the Martians look like in Mars Attacks as well, isn't it? They
hmm
got these gigantic brains and these googly eyes. Um, yeah, silly little aside there, but
I like it. All right, so we are now at chapter 10, The Conquered City.
the conquered city. Okay, yeah, all right. So now this is where the danger of Mark's situation is made very apparent. But in the first paragraph, there's something worth mentioning that I underlined here. Um, so Mark's failing, his conscience is kicking in. He's realizing the deep shift that he's stuck in. Remember that deep shift? What was that? Anyway, um, and he comes to realize that materialism is in fact no protection. Those who seek it in that hope will be disappointed. The thing you fear is impossible. Well and good. Can you therefore cease to fear it? I thought that was an interesting little thing because yes, materialism really is no protection. Um,
hmm
although people will seek it. That's just little two sentences that he throws in there that just shows C.S. Lewis's real grasp of these ideologies and the tensions between them and the situation of the average, not Joe and Jane, but Mark and Jane. And so Mark goes to meet Wither in Hardcastle. I think he's told to go there. And they remind him that he lost his wallet. So if you remember, back when he first arrived there, he lost his wallet. And he and it was never mentioned again. And Hardcastle says, "You've lost your wallet," she said. And and he agrees. He's like, "Yes, I've lost it." And she says, "Does it have £3 and this picture in here? And he says, yes, that's it. And she says, well, this wallet was found in the grass beside the road about 5 yards away from Hingest's body.
Hmm.
And
How
so what we
convenient.
realize, yes, how convenient. And so what we realize is that, and the implication is that the police, not the nice, but the actual real police, suspect Mark for being involved in the murder of Hingest. Now, they also have a copy of a letter that he wrote in which he says, "I wish Builder Blizzard could be moved to a better world," and they're sort of intimidating him and shaking him down and sort of telling him that you're in a really bad situation, but we can help you. You know, it's that kind of mafia thing, isn't it? Of coming to your restaurant and being like, "This is a nice restaurant. It'd be a shame if something happened to it." Like, and again, a little bit further on is the thing I mentioned on the last reading where it says the moment of Mark's decision had passed him by without his noticing it.
Hmm.
You know, so he keeps being drawn into this group without even choosing it. It's like he is choosing it, but he doesn't realize he's choosing it. He's
Hmm.
being managed, he's being handled and brought in this way. And that this mentioned, I put in the margin here, this is the third time at least that it says his decision, the moment of his decision had passed him by without him noticing it. Um, and then there's a mention again of the nice as one great family. And I can't remember what they said to him at this point. They're saying that they can protect him, but do they say he has to do something? He has to. Oh, they're talking about him bringing Jane there again, aren't they?
Yeah, they want
Yeah.
Jane there. And so this is the card they're going
Yes,
to
that's
play.
it.
There's a couple of things here. I'll use the word sin, but we could say that those issues or those problems that get Jane and Mark into their predicament. And Jane's sin is her lack of obedience, her unwillingness to submit. And Mark's sin is that, and maybe it's because he was bullied as a child, we don't know, certain things are implied, but he just is desperate to be on the inside. He wanted to be on the inside at the university. He loved that he was in the in group. This is how he got to the nice in the, because Lord Feverstone said, oh, that might be good. And it's his unwillingness to stand on his own 2 feet, doesn't even know what he thinks, doesn't know what he believes, doesn't know what his moral ground is. He just wants to be liked and accepted by the in crowd.
He's absorbed the trendy views or
Hmm.
what he thinks are the popular trendy views. And that was in the previous chapter where it said he approved of vivisection, although he'd
Yeah.
never, done it himself or been there when it's being
Yeah.
done. So that's telling us that he's shallow in what he thinks and his views because he's absorbed it because he's just constructing this fake persona that he thinks will get him where he thinks he wants to go.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and then he has this, and I was just thinking, how do I phrase this, and I'll just put it in these terms. He has this come to Jesus moment a little later on, where all of this realization comes crashing down on him
Yeah.
about what we were just talking, what you were just saying there, and this need to belong. Anything else for this section? They
No, I
threaten him.
don't.
They
I don't have anything marked until. Let's
I
see,
did
to
I did mark
college.
Wither's indescribable smile, and then
Yeah.
there's another good bit
Yeah,
here
that's a good one.
where it says what had been. So this is right at the end of this section. Wither um, paused with one hand on Mark's shoulder. You must be hungry for your breakfast, he said. Don't let me delay you. Behave with the greatest caution. And and here his face suddenly changed. The widely opened mouth looked all at once like the mouth of some enraged animal. What had been the senile vagueness of the eyes became an absence of all specifically human expression. And bring the girl. Do you understand? Get your wife, he added. The head, he's not patient. So another clue there about whether and what's going on or not behind those
Yes.
eyes. The fact that the absence of all specifically human expression. Um, so then Mark starts panicking and thinking about escaping to America.
He must be desperate.
Yeah. But then he says he'd already read in the papers the warm approval of the NICE and all its works, which came from the United States and from Russia. Some poor
Mhm.
tool just like himself had written them. So he's realizing now what he's part of and how he's being used. Its
Mhm.
claws were embedded in every country. On the liner, this is the ship to America, if he should ever succeed in sailing. On the tender, if he should ever make some foreign port, its ministers would be waiting for him. And he does a runner again.
Mhm.
And he does the same route. He leaves the grounds, he goes across the road, and he gets into the belt of trees. And then it says scarcely a minute had passed since he had left the director's office, the deputy director's office. Because we have to remember that this is Wither is the deputy director, not to be
Mhm.
confused with Ransom, who's the director. Um, and no one had overtaken him, it says. But yesterday's adventure was happening over again. A tall, stooped, shuffling, creaking figure humming a tune barred his way. Mark had never fought. Ancestral impulses lodged in his body, that body which was in so many ways wiser than his mind, directed the blow which he aimed at the head of his senile obstructor. But there was no impact. The shape had suddenly vanished. And so this apparition of Wither walking down the path towards him just disappears. And so this the first time it works on him, he turns around, he goes back, he's got tears in his eyes, and he's scared, and he retreats. This time he gets brave. He takes a swing at the old man, and the shape disappears. What is going on? When I read this, I thought, this is what? So just very very strange. I didn't expect to see that there. This sort of, but as you mentioned, the some like technique that appears as magic, because isn't there that famous quote, about what is what is not understood will appear as magic, or science sufficiently
Yeah,
advanced will
yeah,
appear as
that's
magic.
Arthur C. Clarke.
Right.
Any technology, I think it is that is, so advanced will appear as magic. I think there's something else going on there too, but we're into the realms of, the supernatural.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think that we do get that strange scene with him and Frost, but I think there's something else going on there. And I've heard a few of Alan's stories where, he witnessed a thing or two, and one of them
Okay.
was, just someone who could he was there and then he was there. And
Right.
yeah,
Wow.
and not a nice guy.
Okay. Well, this is sort of I can imagine this being the trade. You um you make a deal. Let's call it a deal with the devil in exchange. Like, just think of the musicians, right? You sell your soul to the devil, and then you get these amazing skills on the music instrument of your choice, whatever it might be. That kind of deal. You make this deal, you make this agreement, you give up part of yourself, or you um, let something, uh, I don't know, use you in some way, and in return you get some skill, some ability, some parlor trick, something that looks like magic to those who don't know how these things work and are
Hmm.
acquired, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I could definitely get on board with that. Yeah, but that makes sense. And it says in the next chapter that he kind of doesn't go into an explanation. He um lets you ponder on that one. So continuing, Mark continues to leave, and he comes to a kind of traveling um, column of people who are all leaving the town Edgestow, and it looks like a procession of refugees leaving a war zone. The
Th
refugees of Edgestow.
This was so, I don't know if you marked it, but this was so sad
Yeah.
because he paints this so vividly. that I really did get the image of people fleeing, like you see in the old black and white footage from war. They've got everything on a cart and they're pulling it behind them, or they've got, their one donkey. And that's what he's describing. They're refugees. And
Yep.
he's listening to the landlord of the pub talk about it. And um, they have no sympathy for the people. He said one of the people watching all this said they never ought to have brought those Welsh and Irish. Now I'm the workers in to help them with the nicest project. So again, it's blaming the immigrants, and they don't see the nice. They just blame the people who've come in to do it. And that was about as far as the criticism went. What struck Mark deeply was the almost complete absence of indignation among the speakers, or even of any distinct sympathy with the refugees.
Yeah, it's like the
Everyone,
landlord and a couple of
yes,
regulars in the pub that he stops in, isn't it?
yeah,
Talking.
yeah. And so they're, and in fact, they've sided more or less with the nice and the nice's enforcers. So
Because
that,
it
yeah,
says in this morning paper that things are pretty well settling down.
that's
The
it.
paper says so.
Yeah. And Mark said, apparently, he and his kind had done their work well.
Yeah, it was sad that.
Miss Hardcastle had rated too high the resistance of the working classes to propaganda.
Yeah, that
So
was it.
they've
Because
succumbed to it. They've turned on each other. If anybody is standing up and saying this isn't right, what's happening? Well, as the landlord said, there'll always be some who get awkward. Yeah,
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 and
yeah.
it's and the another guy says it's got to go on. You can't stop it. What's the good
Hmm.
of getting awkward? And that was the bit. And I agree, this is a real sad section. But what was sad was while this is going on, the men are just sitting in the pub, shrugging their shoulders, saying, "Well, what can you do? What can you do about it?" And that was the sad thing, that there's no men
Yeah.
out there fighting it, trying to do something about it. That they're just in the pub having a drink, watching it happen, watching all these
Yeah.
families be displaced. So, and then yeah, so it was not an easy section. Um, and we learned that, yeah. So he carries on, and he makes it to Edgestowe, and he sees notices everywhere, which are all headed emergency regulations and have the signature of Feverston, who will remind people is Divine.
Hmm.
He's Divine, isn't he? Yeah.
Yes.
Um, then he makes his way to go and see Dimble in his rooms at the at Northumberland, which I think is a university, isn't it?
Hmm.
And this whole exchange, conversation between Mark and Dimble was um, really well done, I thought,
Hmm.
because it's this. Mark really goes through the ringer over the next couple of chapters, and he really comes to know himself and his weaknesses and his failings and his shortcomings, I think. Um, and this interaction with Dimble is kind of an early part of that. So Dimble notices firstly that Studdock Mark's face is different. It's got fatter and paler, and there's vulgarity in the expression since he last saw him. And this
Hmm.
is probably due to all the alcohol that he's been drinking and the late nights he spent writing propaganda, and just the effect of hanging around with the other people of the nice. Um, and then Mark kind of starts talking to Dimble, trying to find out where's Jane, because he's set on bringing her out to Belbury, isn't he? Oh no, does he want to bring her there this time, or does he want to protect her from it? I can't remember.
Well, he
He wants to
is
find her, doesn't
telling
he?
Dimble that he wants to find her because he wants to protect her. That's what he's telling Dimble. But Dimble doesn't trust him, and this is giving him, that first painful really look at himself to see himself through somebody else's eyes, to know that the Dimbles like Jane, and they don't trust him. And nothing that he says convinces Dimble to trust him, and that gives him this kind of, well, she's my wife. Why would I want to bring her any harm? And Dimble, he doesn't buy it.
No. And he lists off all these horrible things that have been happening to different people since the Nice moved in. He talks about it as a town that is occupied and conquered.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he says to Mark, I can only hope you have no power in the Nice at all. If you have no power, then you can't protect her. And if you have, then you're identified with its policy. In neither case will I help you to discover where Jane is. And Mark does this whole, it's like a very weak, um, exasperated reaction, and he starts saying, I'll tell you, because Dimble talks about what happened to Jane being tortured and having cigarettes or cigars uh, put out on her shoulder. And he says, I'll tell you, I'll raise hell about it. I'll break the infernal bitch who did it if it means breaking the whole Nice. Dimble said nothing. Mark knew that Dimble knew that he was talking nonsense, yet Mark could not stop. If he did not bluster, he would not know what to say. Um, yeah, so it's all hot air, and Dimble knows this, and Mark knows this, but he has no other recourse. He doesn't know how else to act. But then he does say he'll leave the Nice if it's all true. And Dimble's conscience comes in and says, do you really mean that? I'll help you if you actually do want to leave the Nice. And then Mark says, I'd need to think that over. So, so he immediately has this backtracking hesitation when Dimble encourages him to leave. And he says, I need time to think. When actually, what he wants to do is go and drink some whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
And he says he'll meet Dimble later with an answer. And he leaves. And on his way out, he gets a tap on the shoulder and he gets arrested for the murder of William Hingist. And then whole there's a little section here where Dimble returns to the house with the director and Jane and everybody, and you get this insight into Dimble as a man, the quality of Dimble's character, where he's like, oh, if only I'd been wiser or been more perfectly in charity, I would have been able to help Mark. And he's saying, did I give in to my temper? Was I self-righteous? Did I tell him as much as I dared? And then a deeper self-distrust, asking himself, did I fail to make things clear because I actually didn't want to? Did I just want to hurt and humiliate? So he has this like this really strong conscience kicking in. Did I do all that I could have done? I really,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the difference between the two. You can see that why Dimble is on this side of good and righteousness.
He says there, he said, did you enjoy your own self-righteousness?
Yeah.
Is there a whole Bellbury inside you too?
Yeah.
And then a sadness came over him. Now, I just have to tell you before I show you the book that I have in my lap at the moment. Um, about a month ago or 6 weeks ago or so, I was having a Christian mystic phase, you might say, and I was looking at the bookshelf and I saw a book of Alan's that I hadn't noticed before, and I pulled it down.
Practicing his presence.
Yeah, practicing his presence. And it says that it's Brother Lawrence and Frank Laubach. And I had looked at it for just a little bit to discover that Brother Lawrence was someone who lived in, say, 1640, 1666. He was, I think he died in 1691. And then there was someone else who was called a Christian mystic of the 1930s, Frank Laubach. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So it's interspersed. It's this Frank Laubach, the mystic's experience of reading Brother Lawrence's work. So I set it down and I didn't read it. I just pulled it for easy access, kind of kept it on the nightstand. I'll get to that. And then when Dimble is having his soul searching moment here, really putting himself under the microscope, he said, "And thus," he quoted from Brother Lawrence, "thus I shall always do whenever you leave me to myself." And I thought, wait a minute. I know that, Brother Lawrence. I got, so I went and got the book and I looked at it. And I always love it if I find that Alan has underlined something or made a margin note. And this one only had a couple of underlinings in it's a slim volume, you can see. Only
Mhm.
had a couple of underlinings. But here is the one. And this is on page 18 of my copy, and it's Laubach talking, this Frank Laubach, the mystic. And he's talking about what he does, what is his practice. And he said the most, now that Alan underlined just this little bit here, right here, that I'm about to read. The most important discovery of my whole life is that one can take a little rough cabin and transform it into a palace just by flooding it with God. And that's the end of the underlining. And I thought it delights me to still be learning about and from Alan. So there it is that he thought was one of two important things in the book worth underlining. And I think that that is, for me, it's so much, it's interesting to see where C.S. Lewis pulls things in and shares these ideas with you and other writers, because the whole through line and the male female complement that we see throughout that both the tug of war, the battle, and the complement is this idea of being in submission to something. And so for me, when you're talking about, I don't know, the song just came to me, or I just said it, and well, thank you for liking it. But to me, that's part of um, being filled with something that isn't really you,
Mm.
that one can't necessarily take credit for.
And actually, that ties in nicely to the end of this chapter, where Dimble goes back to the house and they're making plans, and the director's sort of putting together this party to go out and meet Merlin, because Jane's had a dream, and in her dream, she saw that Merlin's grave, the place where he was buried, is empty. So they think he's up, he's awake, he's alive, he's out.
Hmm.
And so they send a little party to go and meet them. And there's a bit of a back and forth. McPhee wants to go. The director says sending you would be like, the director, Ransom, says McPhee can't go because it would be like sending a 3-year-old to fight a tank. He says it put you to sleep in 10 seconds, which is foreshadowing because actually that does happen later on. And instead, he sends Dimble. And the reason is Dimble has this knowledge of Arthurian Logres and the languages, the tongues of the Great Tongue as well. He has
Hmm.
mastery of this, and Ransom tells him what to say and gives him some direction, and tells him, because he says he doesn't know if Merlin's going to be friendly or not, and he knows Merlin's going to be powerful, so that they're going to, there's risk involved in this mission. He's sending Jane as well because of her visions. She knows, she has that intel on the layout and the place, and will help to find him. But he tells Dimble, if he comes with you, all is well. This is Merlin. If he does not, why then, Dimble? You must rely on your Christianity. Do not try any tricks. Say your prayers and keep your will fixed in the will of Maleldil,
Hmm.
or God. I don't know what he will do, but stand firm. You can't lose your soul, whatever happens. at least not by any action of his. Um, so he's sending them out. And then finally he turns to Jane and he says, "You are all right, child?" And asks her. And she says, "I think so." And then the narrator, C.S. Lewis says, her actual state of mind was one she could not analyze. So she's in a new place, right? This is part of her world being undone. Her expectation was strung up to the height, something that would have been terror but for the joy, and joy but for the terror possessed her, an all absorbing tension of excitement and obedience. Everything else in her life seemed small and commonplace compared with this moment. Do you place yourself in the obedience, said the director, in obedience to Meleldil? Sir, said Jane, I know nothing of Meleldil, but I place myself in obedience to you. It is enough for the present, said the director. This is the courtesy of deep heaven, that when you mean well, he always takes you to have meant better than you knew. It will not be enough for always. He is very jealous. He will have you for no one but himself in the end. But for tonight, it is enough. This is the craziest business ever I heard of, said McPhee. But that bit was just really good, really
Hmm.
beautiful. I thought,
Yes.
especially this about he takes you to mean well, even when he takes you to have meant better than you knew. Right? This
Right.
is what you would call sort of God's perfect love, God's perfect care and compassion and kindness and um, generosity and for for uh, for us all. And yeah, I really like that bit. And she finally steps into obedience to go on this mission and to align herself with this army, the army for good.
Well, she's made
And
a
that's the end of the
choice.
chapter.
Chapter 11, Battle Begun.
Okay. It's looking like we're averaging 3 chapters per video. So
I know.
that's
We're,
good though.
we're,
There's
we're
so much in
trying, we're
here, isn't
trying
there?
very hard to do better, but
And this is quite a long one as well. But yes, chapter 11. The battle begun. Okay. Uh let's see what's going on here. So yeah, they set off to meet um Merlin, and it's a dark night and lots of rain coming down, and they are trudging through fields and contending with hedges, and they see a fire and they creep up on this fire, and they're trying to they don't know what they're going to find there, so it's kind of this whole tension, this tense scene, and then they get down to the fire eventually, and there's nobody there. I don't know if there's anything you highlighted I wanted to mention in that section, but that's basically what
no,
happens.
I didn't. And I'm just looking at my notes here. And I think, okay, so they're out looking for Merlin, and we're going to have a little bit of a scene with Hardcastle. But I think if we truncated this, we could get to 12 in a minute. And 12 is thick. It's rich.
There's a
It's a
lot in
good one.
12.
Yeah. But I mean,
Okay.
for me, what's important here is that yes, they set out on this wet, disgusting, cold night looking for Merlin, and then Miss Hardcastle, Major Hardcastle, Miss the Fairy Hardcastle, reports back that she did not do good on her tailing of Mark Studdock. And that's a kind of a key thing. But what was interesting there to me was how she said who she was going to put her police on. She had she said he was shadowed into Northumberland. Only three possible people left the college after him: Lancaster, Liley, and Dimble. I put them in that order of probability. So she guesses wrong.
Yeah.
She says Lancaster is a Christian and a very influential man. He's in the lower house of convocation. He had a lot to do with the Repton Conference. He's mixed up with several big clerical families, and he's written a lot of books. He has a real stake in their side. Liley is rather the same type, but less of an organizer. As you will remember, he did a great deal of harm on that reactionary commission about education last year. Harm from their perspective. Both these are dangerous men. They are the sort of people who get things done, natural leaders of the other party. Dimble is quite a different type. Except that he's a Christian, there isn't really much against him. He's purely academic. I shouldn't think his name is much known, except to other scholars in his own subject. Not the kind that would make a public man. Impractical. He'd be too full of scruples to be much use to them. The others know a thing or two, Lancaster particularly. In fact, he's a man we could find room for on our own side if he held the right views. So I thought that was important and worth pointing out because she has figured that Mark is likely to go find a Christian. And she's highlighted three of them that he might find. But she is thinking as an organizational mind, not as someone who, I mean, Hardcastle, the very Hardcastle, ever submit to an authority higher than herself? She doesn't follow the deputy director. She's a force of her, she's a law
Mm,
unto herself. So she's guessed wrong because Maleldil doesn't use organization men.
right.
He uses people just like Dimble, too full of scruples.
Yeah. Too
So,
much use.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a great point. I just saw it like yeah, I had the same kind of idea that I hadn't realized it was because of her being an this looking for organization men. I just kind of seen it as just the grace of God, you know.
Well, yeah,
But I think you're right.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so then there's a
And the-
discussion about. Sorry, go on.
well, I was going to say the only other thing that I highlighted there was when Frost and Wither are having a discussion about how Studdock should be dealt with.
Yeah,
And
how they're going to bring him in.
yeah, how they're going to bring him in, what's going to happen. And I loved Withers, his whole little commentary on scientific examination and his little aside there. Scientific examination really is torture in their world. But he said, I cannot allow the word torture in this context. So he's got all these qualifications, but that's exactly what it is. And we're learning more and more that their scientific method is it's anti-human in every way, and that includes torture.
Yeah, and the other thing is that Hardcastle, a little bit before that, just another insight into Wither and what's going on with him, when Hardcastle is kind of challenged by Wither on her methods and a failure. She says, or C.S. Lewis writes, Miss Hardcastle had the feeling that a mere mask of skin and flesh was staring at her, with reference to Wither. So that's another thing I put. And then yeah, they have this conversation. How are they going to bring Mark in? Are they going to scare him into it? Are they going to use an aphrodisiac?
That was a good
um,
line.
yeah. And then but they talk about they do want him and Jane in. Frost says the couple are eugenically interesting,
Hmm.
which was important line they put in there. Um, then I think Wither says, you need not doubt that I would open my arms to receive, to absorb, to assimilate this young man. And you use the word assimilate, right, for the Borg, the
Hmm.
hive mind.
Hmm.
Um, and then this is the weird moment, isn't it? This is the strange thing. They're having this conversation and they're getting closer and closer, Frost and Wither, that is. And C.S. Lewis writes, they were now sitting so close together that their faces almost touched as if they had been lovers about to kiss. Frost's pince nez caught the light so that they made his eyes invisible, only his mouth, smiling, but not relaxed in the smile, revealed his expression. Wither's mouth was open, the lower lip hanging down, his eyes wet, his whole body hunched and collapsed in his chair as if the strength had gone out of it. A stranger would have thought he had been drinking. Then his shoulders twitched and gradually he began to laugh. And Frost did not laugh, but his smile grew moment by moment brighter and also colder. And he stretched out his hand and patted his colleague on the shoulder. Suddenly, in that silent room, there was a crash. Who's Who had fallen off the table, swept onto the floor as, with sudden, swift, convulsive movement, the two old men lurched forward towards each other and sat, swaying to and fro, locked in an embrace from which each seemed to be struggling to escape. And as they swayed and scrabbled with hand and nail, there arose, shrill and faint at first, but then louder and louder, a cackling noise that seemed in the end rather an animal than a senile parody of laughter. And
Yeah.
that is the weird thing that goes on between Frost and Melissa.
It is really
Real
weird.
strange.
It's weird, and it doesn't really, for me, start to make a different kind of sense until the next chapter. It's just,
I just hold
uh,
it
yeah,
there for
I'm like,
now.
okay, that
Yeah.
was really weird. You know?
So now we get now then we get back with Mark, and he
Uh-huh.
has his what I was talking about, the come to Jesus moment,
Yes.
and he starts to reflect on his life because he thinks he's going to be hanged now that he's facing death.
Hmm.
He it's coming to an end. He starts to look back, and
Well, that's
he
what we should say. He gets, he's tossed in jail,
oh yeah,
and that's important. And he's just sitting there, and he's left to stew. And so stew he does, and he's coming to Jesus moment while he's, or series of moments while he's stewing in jail.
and he sees that it didn't start with his first interview with the deputy director. It goes back to his schoolboy days, even,
Hmm.
and the way he mistreated his girlfriend and the way he mistreated his friends. And he's naming the people
Hmm.
that he abandoned for these popular groups that he was trying to get into. And this is just a pattern that he's repeated all the way through, isn't it?
Hmm.
And he
Hmm.
talks about how he would learn the new slang of the circle that he
Hmm.
was trying to get into, and how he would
The,
abandon
the
the old
perpetual,
people.
he says, the perpetual assumption of interest in things he found dull and of knowledge he did not possess, the almost heroic sacrifice of nearly every person and thing he actually enjoyed. So he's trying to become popular. He'll sacrifice anybody and everybody, and he has done that his whole life so that he can just keep going for the in crowd. Who's the in crowd?
Hmm. Yeah, it says a bit I underlined here was his quote scientific outlook had never been a real philosophy believed with blood and heart. It had lived only in his brain. It was a part of that public self, which was now falling off him. And I just just scientific outlook. It's a
Yeah.
Bertrand Russell book, isn't it? The title of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
Bertrand Russell book. I don't know if that's coincidence or not, but it might be a little. Oh, I did I lose connectivity?
You froze for just a moment. You were talking about Bertrand Russell book, and then you just froze for just a moment, brief moment.
I can hear you just
Okay.
about,
All
just
right.
about. There's a little.
Delay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're back.
Okay.
Don't know what happened there.
Yeah. Yeah. You were talking about his scientific outlook. Yes, and that was
Yes,
Bertrand Russell. Yeah.
that was the last point I made. So he and then there's this realization or this admission at least about what his plan was for Jane and why he married her, and it was to make her into the great hostess once he had become successful.
Hmm.
And so that's what it was. He'd kind of seen her. She's good looking. She's eugenically pleasing. That's what a compliment, right? Boys and girls out there, you can start using that when you're dating. Like, um, and yeah, and he admits that it's not about her who she is personality wise and their connection. It's kind of she'll make a good hostess, a good trophy wife, in other words.
Hmm.
Um, And then he sees her in a different light, and he realizes that he wants to be aligned with people like her and the Denistons and the Dimbles, um, who could enjoy things for their own sake. And then again, he has this realization that it was well that she should be rid of him.
That's one of the
Uh,
things in this. I just made the note. It's kind of his dark night of the soul. He's
yeah,
really wrestling with himself. And one of the things that he realizes about being a people pleaser and a people user and needing to be in the inner circle is he's actually never in his life done anything that he liked.
right.
And then it kind of goes into pity. He said, when had he ever done what he wanted, mixed with the people whom he liked, or even eaten and drunk what took his fancy? The concentrated insipidity of it all filled him with self-pity. So he's got remorse. Now he's going into self-pity, but he's really looking at himself and saying, wow, I've done everything wrong in my life so far.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
almost like, who even am I? Like, he doesn't even know
Yeah.
what he likes. Like, he can't even imagine what he would have picked or chosen to do if he had been following his own
Hmm.
volition, his own unique individual path, right? But this is just a great example of when you just follow the path that's laid out in front of you.
Yeah.
When you go to the university, and like we said, or I said on my last live stream, I think the university, it's the one verse, right? It
Hmm.
it creates a situation where everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet. It's the university, it's the standardization of people. Just walk down this little path, go through this process, and don't question it, don't think about it, and it's laid out for you right there, and it's got lights, and it's alluring, and people just go along with it without even thinking about whether or not they want to. And so he realizes this has all happened. And then Frost walks in to the cell, and Mark notices a change in his eyes. He says it's the same Frost that it has always been, but what Mark could not understand was how he had ever managed to overlook something about the man so obvious that any child would have shrunk away from him, and any dog would have backed into the corner with raised hackles and bared teeth. Death itself did not seem more frightening than the fact that only 6 hours ago he would in some measure have trusted this man. So,
Yeah.
and then we leave Mark and we're on to the next chapter.
How are you doing for time?
I got about 25 minutes, half an hour I can do. And then,
Well, yeah, so we were aiming to get through all the way through chapter 13, and we're not going to do it, but we might be able to swing
12.
12. What do you think?
Let's see. 12.
There's some good meaty stuff in 12.
Let's go for it. Let's go for it. Why not?
Okay, 12 is Wet and Windy Night.
Okay. Wet and windy night. This is the search party who have gone to meet Merlin. They kind of what do they do? They decide to go back, don't they? They don't find him. They don't find
They don't
anybody.
find him. They've Jane has spotted a horse, the horse with some kind of rider on it that they can't make
Oh yeah,
out gets away, and they pursue that for a while, but eventually they
they
just
go
give up.
back.
Yep, they realize, well, whatever it was faster than them, and they don't really understand how they were outsmarted, but they were.
And then we go back to the nice at Belbury and the deputy director who hardly ever sleeps.
Hmm.
And we're told about his mode of consciousness having long ceased to be exactly like what other men call waking. It says, yeah, it says, what was was this the creepy bit? Yeah, this is the really creepy bit. So colors, tastes, smells, and sensations still bombard his physical senses in the normal manner, but they did not now reach his ego. And a bit further down, it says, anyone who looked into the study during the hour would have seen him, the deputy director, sitting motionless at his table with bowed head and folded hands. His eyes were not shut. The face had no expression. The real man was far away, suffering, enjoying, or inflicting whatever such souls do suffer, enjoy, or inflict when the cord that binds them to the natural order is stretched out to its utmost, but not yet snapped. That was
Yeah.
so creepy when
Yeah.
I read that bit. He gets a phone call from Stone, who has some, I think it's bad news, isn't it? And just bad news in terms of tracking down, I think, Jane.
So I think Stone was actually out looking for Merlin.
Merlin. Sorry, yeah, Merlin.
Yeah.
So Stone, yeah, Stone was sent to get Merlin. Um, does he have bad news? Doesn't he
Well,
go into it to
he
say,
doesn't have good news. He can't really find him, and
hmm,
that's an interesting bit there too, because you get when Stone is in there with the deputy director, he says, it's just it's the way in which the deputy director approaches everything, all of his conversations. It's kind of torture. And he said, um, so you didn't think of putting an accompanying party on that person that you thought might be with, there's somebody who was speaking Latin, and he thought it might be somebody that was with Merlin.
hmm,
And he said, you didn't think of it accompanying a party yourself. Well, no, sir. You told me to ring up without fail the moment we found anything, and I didn't want to delay the search parties. I see. Well, no doubt your actions, speaking quite without prejudice, could be interpreted along those lines. So he's constantly playing games like a predator with everybody that comes into his path. He's given the guy clear instructions. You need to tell me immediately what's going on. And when he does that, he said, why weren't you with the search party? Because you told me to come here immediately and tell you what was going on. Oh, I guess you could interpret it that way. So it's always so he then launches into this bit. I am on the whole, and with certain inevitable reservations, moderately satisfied with your conduct of this affair. I believe that I may be able to present it in a favorable light to those of my colleagues whose goodwill you have, unfortunately, not been able to retain. If you can bring it to a successful conclusion, you would very much strengthen your position. If not, it is inexpressibly painful to me that there should be these tensions and mutual recrimination among us. But you quite understand me, my dear boy. If I could only persuade, say, Miss Hardcastle and Mr. Studdock to share my appreciation of your very real qualities, you'd need to have no apprehension about your career security. And Stone just wants to get to the point. What do you want me to do, sir?
yeah.
And he goes on, in deputy director fashion. So what you see are the two sides of Wither, the deputy director, that are so freaky and awful. The first is the fact that the lights are on, but nobody's home most of the time when nobody's looking. And the second is that when he's on, when he's been turned on, he's just an annoying, double talking, time wasting, somebody that you'd want to just shake and say, as Stone said, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, and then the answer that he gives to that is equally just infuriating. So that, yeah, and that's from the beginning that deputy director is introduced. He speaks this way, doesn't he? Because that's why
Hmm.
Mark gets so flustered and frustrated when he can't figure out what his job is and what he's there to
Hmm.
do and whether or not he has a job. Yeah, that's a good point. Very creepy character indeed. Um, the next section, we already covered because that's the Dimbles and Jane and
Hmm.
tracking this horse rider, and then we're back with in Mark's cell with Frost, and I think this is probably the bit. This has a lot of meat in it, doesn't it? This section
Yeah.
I've pretty much just highlighted and lined the whole thing
Yeah.
because this is Frost's play to bring Mark in. This eugenically pleasing Mark who's already knows so much. They can't let him go. They've made that clear. Now it's make a decision. It's decision time for Mark, in other words, isn't it?
Hmm.
Um, he tells Mark, "You're in danger, but you are also within reach of a great opportunity." Mark says, and actually, Mark hasn't didn't know he was at the institute till this point, did he? He wasn't
Mm-mm.
sure.
He
He
thought he
didn't
was
know.
just in a normal prison, but he was imprisoned at the Nice.
And then so Frost, before going on, Mark says, "Why? What all this farce of a murder charge if you're just going to kill me?" And Frost says, "Before going on, I must ask you to be strictly objective. Resentment and fear are both chemical phenomena. Our reactions to one another are chemical phenomena. Social relations are chemical relations. You must observe these feelings in yourself in an objective manner. Do not let them distract your attention from the facts." Um, but Mark is having this new insight into Belbury, which is keeping him on the defensive, not believing anything that Frost says, and determined not to accept any offer made. And Frost fills him in. The murder charge against you is part of a planned program. It's a discipline through which everyone is passed before admission to the circle.
Mhm.
And Mark Mark certainly becomes interested at this point. A circle, an inner circle, you know.
Mhm.
Um, it- Frost continues, it is again to promote objectivity. A circle bound together by subjective feelings of mutual confidence and liking would be useless. Those, as I have said, are chemical phenomena. They could all, in principle, be produced by injections.
Mhm.
I just thought that like funny they had to
Mhm.
mention injections, right? You have been made to pass through a number of conflicting feelings about the deputy director and others in order that your future association with us may not be based on feelings at all. Insofar as there must be social relations between members of the circle, it is perhaps better that they should be feelings of dislike. There is less risk of their being confused with the real nexus. My future association, said Studdock, acting a tremulous eagerness, but it was perilously easy for him to act it. The reality might reawake at any moment. Yes, said Frost, you have been selected as a possible candidate for admission. If you do not gain admission or if you reject it, it will be necessary to destroy you. The process would be quite painless. Mark considers this thoughtfully. And then this is, and then they start talking about the head, right? Frost say, what is he, how does he mention the head?
He said, I must begin by telling you, this is still Frost talking here, that neither the deputy director nor
Oh, yeah.
I are responsible for shaping the policy of the Institute. And Mark said, the head? No. Philostrato and Wilkins are quite deceived about the head. They have indeed carried out a remarkable experiment by preserving it from decay, but Alcasan's mind is not the mind we are in contact with when the head speaks. Do you mean Alcasan is really dead? Asked Mark. His surprise at Frost's last statement needed no acting. In the present state of our knowledge, said Frost, there is no answer to that question. Probably it has no meaning, but the cortex and vocal organs in Alcasan's head are used by a different mind. And now, please attend very carefully. You have probably not heard of macrobes. Microbes, said Mark in bewilderment. But of course, I did not say microbes, I said macrobes. The formation of the word explains itself. Below the level of animal life, we have long known that there are microscopic organisms. Their actual results on human life in respect of health and disease have, of course, made up a large part of history. The secret cause was not known till we invented the microscope. Go on, said Mark. Ravenous curiosity was moving like a sort of groundswell beneath his conscious determination to stand on guard. I have now to inform you that there are similar organisms above the level of animal life. When I say above, I am not speaking biologically. The structure of the macrobe, so far as we know it, is of extreme simplicity. When I say that it is above the animal level, I mean that it is more permanent, disposes of more energy, and has greater intelligence. More intelligent than the highest anthropods, said Mark. It must be pretty nearly human then. You have misunderstood me. When I say it transcended the animals, I was, of course, including the most efficient animal, man. The macrobe is far more intelligent than man. And Mark frowned. But how is it in that case that we have had no communication with them? And then he goes on to talk about this and into but I wrote down here at this explanation, demonic parasite. And I
Hmm.
think, that I'm not one who has thought of what you might call the demonic as a parasite, but Jerry Marzinski, we've heard some of his talks. He's referred to them, and others have too, as parasitic. But it's this next bit where C.S. Lewis is writing about thought and how these macrobes work. He said, it is only as you begin to have intercourse, some kind of, interaction with the macrobes, is the realization that one must go outside the whole world of our subjective emotions. It is only as you begin to do so that you discover how much of what you mistook for your thought was merely a byproduct of your blood and nervous tissues. So then they get into the whole idea of what is thought, where do the thoughts come from, and what are these organisms? And you could, I mean, I don't know because we're both at about the same point in our reading, but we may later hear them referred to as dark Eldil or dark Eldila. But at this point, what Frost is telling him is that the head is not Alcazan that has been electrically or, through some kind of stimulation brought back to life. It's just a talking organ that allows something else to come through it.
It's a yeah, it's a communication um uh, pathway or conduit.
And
Very
eh,
creepy.
yeah, I mean, and it goes on. There's more to this conversation.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
The bit that I wanted to bring out as well, which I was surprised about, is talking about there's a sort of bit about history, isn't there?
Hmm.
Marx like saying we need a large population for the full exploitation of nature. And Frost replies, that idea is a survival from conditions which are being altered.
Hmm.
A large agricultural population was essential, and war destroyed types which were then still useful. But every advance reduces the number of work people who are required. A large, unintelligent population is now becoming a dead weight. The real importance of scientific war is that scientists have to be reserved. It was not the great technocrats at Königsberg or Moscow who supplied the casualties in the siege of Stalingrad. It was superstitious Bavarian peasants and low grade Russian agricultural workers. The effect of modern war is to eliminate retrogressive types while sparing the technocracy. and
Mhm.
increasing its hold upon public affairs. In the new age, what has hitherto been merely the intellectual nucleus of the race is to become, by gradual stages, the race itself. You are to conceive the species as an animal which has discovered how to simplify nutrition and locomotion to such a point that the old complex organs and the large body which contained them are no longer necessary. That large body is therefore to disappear. Only a tenth part of it will now be needed to support the brain. The individual is to become all head. The human race is to become all technocracy. I was
Mhm.
just like, I didn't expect to see the word technocracy there or in the book when I came upon this bit. I was quite, yeah, um, quite surprised. And the like Frost continued. This is the revelation. This is the plan being revealed in its full extent, I think, isn't it? He
Mhm.
says that is. Mark says, I thought vaguely that the intelligent nucleus would be extended by education, and Frost says that's pure chimera. The great majority of the human race can be educated only in the sense of being given knowledge. They cannot be trained into the total objectivity of mind which is now necessary. They will always remain animals, looking at the world through the haze of their subjective reactions. Even if they could, the day for a large population has passed. It's served its function by acting as a kind of cocoon for technocratic and objective man. Now, the macrobes and the selected humans who can cooperate with them have no further use for it. The last two wars, he says, were simply the beginning of the program, the first two of the 16 major wars which are scheduled to take place this century. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
amazingly creepy stuff.
Yeah, it really is.
And then the final sort of play from Frost. Oh no, not from Frost. Sorry, this is sort of what happens within Mark. He stares at the floor for a while, processing it, and then he has a conflict between his resolution not to trust these men, never again to be lured by any bait into real cooperation, into the terrible strength, like a tide sucking at the shingle as it goes out of an opposite emotion. For here surely at last, so his desire whispered to him, was the true inner circle of all, the circle whose center was outside the human race, the ultimate secret, the supreme power, the last initiation. The fact that it was almost completely horrible did not in the least diminish its attraction. Nothing that lacked the tang of horror would have been quite strong enough to satisfy the delirious excitement which now set his temples hammering. It came into his mind that Frost knew all about this excitement and also about the opposite determination, and reckoned securely on the excitement as something which was certain to carry the day in his victim's mind.
Mm.
And then there's a knock on the door, and Frost is called away, and the Mark is left again on his own in the cell. And I think that is where we're going to have to leave it for now because I'm running out of time.
Okay.
That's a good place to leave it. I think we got to a nice point there because
Yeah.
the plan is revealed. It's technocratic. It's a hive mind. It's plugging into demonic entities and
Yeah.
the evil Eldila, the fallen angels. There's different words that we can use, isn't there, that are sort of well known, but basically the parasitical evil entities and spirits which are living on the moon. That's what we learned in the last part, wasn't it? They live on the moon, and they're um, keeping our world in the state that it is in, with all the
Mhm.
war, the death, and the destruction, and the pain, and the suffering, and the paranoia, and all that other stuff. And that's one thing that I really appreciated from this trilogy of books is this framing of Earth as a kind of much like the town of Edgestowe. We're occupied by hostile forces, I think that's a really powerful way to look at what's going on here. Because people might we talked about last time. I'm currently going through political ponerology, or we are. You're part of the book club as well, and we're going through that in the book club, and that's this sort of scientific account of evil, where it comes from, how it takes over societies, and it doesn't go into the spiritual or the metaphysical. But I think sometimes when we look at what goes on and the kind of try to understand the mindset of the people who align themselves with horrific events such as the Big C that we lived through, and all the other terrors and atrocities, the horror show of history, as Alan Watt would say. There just seems no other explanation than there being some kind of force or evil behind it, or enhancing it, or powering it, or something, right? And this idea that we're in a place that's occupied by enemy hostile forces, I think, just seems to it's compelling for me, at least.
I think so. And I think that one of the things that he does so well with the characters, with Jane and with Mark, is to show you the very real human failings and flaws that make us susceptible to making the wrong decisions and making the wrong choices. Even there in that last scene, he's already had us come to Jesus. He's seen how pathetic he is, and he's excited at the prospect of being in the inner circle.
Yeah,
And that's how it works on and through people. So,
yeah. And actually, I was thinking about that. C.S. Lewis's depiction of these characters is so believable and realistic. Like he knew people clearly
yeah.
to make these characters, all of them, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Just so like from Hardcastle to the deputy director to Ransom to the Denistons and Dimble, and then to Merlin, as we'll meet on the next discussion. He just he knows human psychology, I think, very well. He knows
Hmm.
human personality, he knows motivations, and he knows good and evil. And he just depicts it in a way that's a pleasure to read. And every time I get to dive back into this book and take a break from Zbigniew Brzezinski or political ponerology, I'm always like relieved, and just it's such a nice change of pace. So as always, I'm glad we're
I
doing this series.
I noticed that you're not trying to pronounce the name of the author of Political Ponerology, and I wouldn't either,
Wobachevsky, I think that's how it goes.
Wapachevsky.
Yeah, because it's an L, but it's got a dash through it, which apparently is
Uh,
a W sound.
oh,
So yeah,
okay.
Wobachevsky.
All right. Well, that's a good compliment to this. Well, Judy, thank you so much. Love our
Yes,
scarves.
I feel like I'll never do another broadcast without it. It's
Oh, I know, I tell you, and it really is a cold and gloomy, damp day and freezing outside and not that warm in. So I'm
well, they do
happy.
tell you as well, like if you want to go viral, you should have some kind of thing that you do like I know one guy I see on Instagram, and he's selling courses on how to make your videos go viral, and he's always holding a banana in every single clip. So they tell you to pick this thing that you do that'll hold people's attention. So maybe
So
like scarves could be the thing, and
yeah,
maybe we'll
our
start getting
matching
those big
outfits.
numbers.
Do you have time for a quick story, a minute long
Yep.
before you go? Okay. So my mom and dad got together in the very early 50s, and he was studying music at university, and one of his things was he got to be like the guest head of the choir because that's what he was headed towards. And back then, I guess if you were going steady with someone, you'd wear a matching outfit. And so
Okay.
his first year he'd gone steady with one girl and he had the matching sweater with her. The second year he'd gone steady with another girl and they had the matching outfit. And third year he'd gone steady with yet another one and they had their matching outfit. Well, my mom comes along. I think she'd been there for a while, but she kind of surfaces as a contender. They were all singers, you see, but my
Mm,
mom, she was a pianist. So
okay.
that's a whole different level. So
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
so he's like, okay, this one's a keeper. And when they had announced their engagement, in some kind of production. All three of the other also rans came in one day to choir practice wearing their matching varsity kind of sweaters with made a big show.
Oh, right. I see. They all coordinated it,
Yeah,
did
they
they?
all coordinated. They're like, yeah, let's go get him. So he's like,
Nice.
sorry, I'm going with the piano player.
Yeah. It's funny, my wife and I have, well, people probably know by now that I lived in Asia for a number of years, and over there it's still a fairly common thing. You'll see these couples going around and they'll have matching trainers, trousers, jumpers, coats. They're like it's a real thing over there. And my wife was kind of like looking at it, it's like, oh, it'd be nice if we did something like that. I was like, no, I've always just said no, I'm not doing it. And then, now I feel bad. Now I
Well,
feel
yeah,
bad. I
you
probably
should
should,
feel bad, Nick. I mean,
Yeah.
what's it gonna kill you to match your wife, huh?
Her style is way better than mine, so it would probably
I've seen the
do me good.
pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it would probably do me good actually to, so I'll consider that. Maybe that'll be
All
a Christmas
right.
present.
Well, everyone, thank you very much. And if all goes well, next week I'll be talking to Christine. But Nick and I, we may, since we're coming up on the Christmas holiday, we may just do some extra, and we'll have like a bonus real history. Because who doesn't need 2 or 3 hours of me of me and Nick talking about books?
Well, the more the merrier. That's what I say. Yeah. I mean, I want the world to be full of more people spending many more hours talking about books.
All
That's the
right.
mission.
Well, we're doing our bit.
Yes. Lead by
So
example.
that's it. Yep. All right. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye.